This is Wes Struble. I teach science and mathematics at Logos School. I've been doing that for 26 years. I'll be reading from the Iliad in chapter 13, where the Greeks rally after a Trojan advanced out of Troy. I'll be reading from the Penguin Classics translation, translated with an introduction by Martin Hammond. Now when Zeus had brought Hector and the Trojans through to the ships, he left the men to endure hardship and misery beside them in relentless battle, and he turned his shining eyes away, looking far out over the land of the horse-herding Thracians and the Mysians, fighters at close quarters, and the proud Hippomogoi, who live on mare's milk, and the Obii, most civilized of all men. Towards the land of Troy now he did not turn his shining eyes at all. He did not think in his heart that any of the immortals would come to bring help to either the Trojans or the Danaans. But the Earthshaker, powerful lord, was not keeping blind watch. He too was gazing at the battle and the fighting, sitting high on the tallest peak of wooded Thracian Samos. From there all of Ida could be seen, and Priam's city and the ships of the Achaeans. He had gone up from the sea and seated himself there, and he felt pity for the Achaeans being broken by the Trojans, and furious anger at Zeus. Immediately he came down from the rocky mountain with fast strides, and the high mountains and the forests trembled under the immortal feet of Poseidon in motion. He took 3 strides, and with the 4th reached his goal, Aigai, where his glorious palace was built in the depths of the water in gleaming gold, imperishable forever. There he went, and harnessed a pair of bronze-hoofed horses to his chariot, wing-swift horses, with flowing manes of gold, and dressed himself in gold, and took up his whip, which was finely made of gold, and mounted his chariot and went driving out over the waves. The sea beasts gathered from their lairs and gamboled at his coming, and they recognized their lord. The sea divided a path for him in joyfulness, and the horses flew lightly on, and the bronze axle below was not wetted. So his bounding horses carried him to the ships of the Achaeans. There was a wide cave deep down in the water, halfway between Tenedos and rocky Imbros. There Poseidon the Earthshaker reined in his horses, unyoked them from his chariot, and tossed immortal fodder down for them to eat. And he put golden hobbles round their feet, which could not be broken or slipped, so they should wait there unmoving for the return of their master. He then went to the Achaean army. The Trojans were coming on in a mass behind Hector, son of Priam, like flame or a storm wind, full of insatiable fury, and joining their shouts in a single roar, their thoughts were of taking the Achaean ships and killing all the best of their men beside them. But Poseidon, the encircler and shaker of the earth, had come from the deep sea and began to spur on the Argives, taking the form and tireless voice of Calchas. He spoke to the 2 Iantes first, who were already eager for the fight. Iantes, you too must save the Achaean army. Fill your minds with courage and no thoughts of chilling flight. Elsewhere I have no fear of the powerful hands of the Trojans, who have climbed over the great wall in their masses. The well-greaved Achaeans will be able to hold them all. But it is here that I have the most terrible dread of disaster for us, where that madman is leading them on like a flame of fire, Hector, who could well be a son of almighty Zeus himself. May some god make it your thought to stand strong against him yourselves and urge the others too. Then, for all his fury, you could turn him back from the speedy ships, even if the Olympian himself is driving him on. So speaking, the encircler and shaker of the earth struck them both with his staff and filled them with strength of spirit, and made their limbs light, their legs and their arms above. Then he left them, as a swift-winged hawk darts into flight, when it hovers over a sheer rock face, very high, then swoops down over the plain in chase of another bird. So fast and sudden was the leaving of Poseidon the Earthshaker. Quick Ajax, Oileus' son, was the first of them to recognize a god's work, and he spoke at once to Ajax, son of Telamon. Ajax, this was one of the gods who hold Olympus, taking the seer's form and urging us to fight by the ships. It was not Calchas, our prophet and Agor. I could tell it well from the form of his feet and legs from the back that he left us. from the back as he left us. It is easy to recognize the gods. And my own heart in my breast is keener now for battle and fighting, and there is eagerness in my legs under me and my arms above. Then Ajax, son of Telamon, answered him, It is the same for me too. My invincible hands now feel eager on my spear. My strength is aroused. Both legs beneath me are urging me on. I long to meet Hector, son of Priam, in all his insatiable fury, and fight him single-handed. Such were the words to each other, and they exulted in the fighting urge which the god had put into their hearts. Meanwhile, the encircler of the earth roused the other Achaeans at the rear. They were back by the fast ships trying to revive their spirits. The strength of their bodies was collapsed in the pain of exhaustion, and at the same time despair came over their hearts at the sight of the Trojans who had climbed over the great wall in their masses. As they looked out at them, the tears began to fall from their eyes. They did not think they could escape disaster. But the Earthshaker moved effortlessly among them and spurred their battalions to strength. He came first with his incitement to Teucros and Letos, and the hero Peneleos, and Thoas, and Diprios, and Meriones, and Antilochus, rousers of the battle cry. He spoke to them in winged words, urging them on. Shame, you Argives, mere boys! You are the ones I trust in to save our ships, if you will fight. But if you men hang back from the misery of battle, then the day of our crushing by the Trojans is now here to be seen. Oh, this is a great astonishment for my eyes, a fearful thing that I never thought would come about, the Trojans moving on our ships, men who before now were like timorous deer, who make food for jackals and leopards and wolves in the forest as they wander about in utter helplessness with no fight in them. So the Trojans before now were not prepared to stand and face the fury of the Achaean hands, even for a little while. But now they have brought the fight far from their city, right to our hollow ships, through the fault of our leader and the reluctance of his people, who in their resentment of him are not willing to fight for the speedy ships, but allow themselves to be killed among them. But even if all the blame truly belongs to the hero, son of Atreus, wide-ruling Agamemnon, for his slighting of the swift-footed son of Peleus, yet we cannot possibly hold back from fighting. No, we must be quick to set it right. Brave men's hearts are easily righted. But this slacking of your fighting spirit does you no credit now. You, who are all leading men in the army. I would not quarrel with a man hanging back from battle if he were a poor creature of no account. But for you, my heart is filled with anger. Dear friends, soon this reluctance of yours will lead to something much worse than its cause. Put some shame in your hearts, each of you, for yourselves and for your anger of others. A great struggle is now on us. Hector, master of the war cry, has broken the gates and their long crossbar, and is fighting now in strength by our ships. So, with constant urging, the encircler of the earth roused the Achaeans, and the battalions formed around the two Aeantes in full strength, such as not even Ares, if he had part in it, would make light of them, nor Athena, the rouser of armies. There the choice of their leading men stood firm to face godlike Hector and the Trojans, fencing spear by spear, shield rooted against shield, shield then pressed on shield, helmet on helmet, man on man. The horsehair crests of their bright ridges of their helmets touched when they moved their heads, so close to each other were they dressed, and the spears gripped in brave hands made a serried line. Their intent did not waver, and they were eager for the fight. The Trojans charged forward in a mass, with Hector at their head, pressing furiously like a boulder broken from a wall of rock, which a river swollen in winter spate has swept over the edge, when the huge flood of rainwater has broken the stubborn rock's hold on it. It bounds in the air and goes flying down, and the undergrowth crashes beneath it. It runs straight on without check until it reaches level ground, and then it can roll no more for all its energy. So Hector for a time threatened to sweep easily through the huts and ships of the Achaeans right to the sea, killing along his path. But when he came against those close-set battalions, he pressed in hard, but was brought to a stop. The sons of the Achaeans faced him, thrusting at him with swords and double-pointed spears, and pushed him away from them, and he was shaken back and retreat. Hector called in a great carrying shout to the Trojans, "Trojans and Lycians and close-fighting Dardanians, stand by me. The Achaeans will not hold me for long, even though they have formed themselves into a wall against me. No, I think they will give way under my spear. If it was indeed the greatest of gods that inspired my attack, the loud thundering husband of Hera." So speaking, he spurred the strength and heart in each of them, and among them Deiphobos strode out with high thoughts in his mind, one of Priam's sons. He held the even circle of his shield in front of him and stepped lightly forward, advancing under cover of his shield. Meriones took aim at him with his shining spear and did not miss, hitting in the even circle of the bullseye shield. But well before it could drive through it, the long spear broke off at the socket, and Deiphobos held his bull's hide shield well away from him, his heart frightened by the warrior Meriones' spear. But the hero moved back into the mass of his companions, doubly furious, both for the robbing of his victory and for the spear that had broken, and he set off to the huts of the ships of the Achaeans to bring back a long spear which he had left in his hut. Meanwhile, the others fought on, and the clamor rose ceaseless. Teucros, Telamon's son, was the first to kill his man, the spearman Imbrios, son of Mentor, rich in horses. He used to live in Pedios before the sons of the Achaeans came, and was married to a bastard daughter of Priam, Mediscaste. But when the Danaans' balanced ships came, he returned to Ilos, and was a leading man among the Trojans, and lived with Priam, who showed him the same honor as his own children. Telamon's son stabbed him with his long spear under the ear and pulled the spear out. He dropped like an ash tree which is felled by the bronze on the peak of a far-seen mountain and brings its soft leaves down to the ground. So he fell, and the bronze of his crafted armor rang over him. Teucros leapt forward, eager to strip his armor, and as he leapt, Hector cast at him his shining spear. But he had looked ahead and avoided the bronze spear by a small margin, and Hector's cast hit Amphimachus, son of Cteos, Actor's line, in the chest as he came into battle. He fell with a crash, and his armor clattered about him. Hector leapt forward to pull the helmet from the great-hearted Amphimachus' head, where it fitted close around his temples, and as he leapt, Ajax thrust at Hector with his shining spear. But no part of his flesh could be seen, and he was covered all over in fearsome bronze. But Ajax struck at the boss of his shield, and with his huge strength pushed him back. Hector pulled back from the two bodies, and the Achaeans dragged them away. Stichios and godlike Menesthius, leaders of the Athenians, carried Amphimachus back to the Achaean lines, while the two Aeantes, raging with battle fury, lifted Imbrios as two lions seize a goat from under the guard of saw-toothed dogs and carry it off through the thick brush, holding it high over the ground in their jaws. So the two warriors Aeantes held Imbrios high and stripped off his armor, and the son of Oileus hacked the head from its soft neck, in fury at the death of Amphimachus. Then swung it round and hurled it like a ball into the mass of men, and it dropped in the dust at Hector's feet. And then Poseidon's heart was enraged at the fall of his grandson, Amphimachus, in the grim battle, and he went along by the huts of the ships of the Achaeans to urge on the Danaans, and he preparing trouble for the Trojans. Now Idomeneus met him, the famous spearman, on his way from seeing to one of his own company who had just now come out from fighting, wounded in the ham by a sharp spear. His companions had carried him in, and Idomeneus had instructed the healers, and was now going to his own hut, as he was eager to face more of the fighting. The Earthshaker, powerful lord, spoke to him, talking in the voice of Thoas, son of Adramanon, who was king over the Aetolians in the Pleuron and in steep Calydon, and honored by his people like a god. Idomeneus, counselor of the Cretans, where are those threats gone that the sons of the Achaeans used to make against the Trojans? Then Idomeneus, leader of the Cretans, answered him, Thoas, no man is now to blame, as far as I can see it. We all know how to fight. Not one of us has been gripped by fear and had the heart taken from him. No one is giving way to terror and shirking the misery of battle. No, such it seems must be the pleasure of Zeus the Almighty, that the Achaeans perish here in oblivion, far from Argos. But, Thoas, you have always been one to face the enemy and spur others on too, whenever you see a man slacking. So do not stop now. Keep urging on every man you meet. Then Poseidon, the earth-shaker, answered him, Idomeneus, may the man who this day deliberately holds back from this fight never make his return from the land of Troy, but stay here to give the dogs their sport. Come then, fetch your armor and come with me. This is business we must dispatch together, if we are to do some good as a pair. Combination brings courage, even in the poorest of fighters, and we two are men who could fight with the best. So speaking, Poseidon went back, a god among the sufferings of men. And when Idomeneus reached his well-built hut, he clothed his body in his fine armor, and took up a pair of spears, and set out like the lightning which the son of Cronos takes in his hand and hurls from bright Olympus, to reveal a sign to mankind. And his flash is brilliant in men's eyes, so the bronze flashed bright on his chest as he ran. Now his brave lieutenant Meriones met him, not far yet from his hut. He was on his way to fetch a bronze spear, and the mighty Idomeneus spoke to him. Meriones, son of Molos, quick runner, dearest of my friends, why have you left the battle's conflict to come here? Have you perhaps been hit? Is the wound from a spear point paining you? Or have you come from me with some message of summons? I, for one, have no wish to sit idle in the huts, but I want to be fighting. Then Meriones, good man of sense, answered him, Idomeneus, counselor of the bronze-clad Cretans, I am coming to fetch a spear, if there is one left in your hut. I have just broken the one I carried before, when my cast hit the shield of that braggart Phobos. Then Idomeneus, leader of the Cretans, answered him, As for spears, you will find one, or 20 if you wish, standing against the polished wall of my hut, Trojan spears, which I take from the men I kill. It is not my idea to stand at a distance when fighting my enemies, so I have spears there, and bossed shields and helmets and bright gleaming corslets. Then Meriones, good man of sense, answered him, I too have Trojan spoils in plenty in my hut and in my black ship, but not close by for my taking. I can claim, too, not to have lost my spirit for the fight. No, in the battle where men win glory, I take my stand with the front fighters, whenever the conflict of war breaks out. It may be that some other bronze-clad Achaeans see little of how I fight, but I think you know it well for yourself. Then Idomeneus, leader of the Cretans, answered him, I know the measure of your courage. What need for you to recount all this? Because if now all the best of us were to be selected by ships for the ambush, this is where men's courage is best seen. Where the coward and the brave man are revealed, the coward's skin changes from color to color, and his heart within him will not keep him sitting quietly, but he keeps shifting his feet and squats now on one leg, now on the other. His heart thumps loud in his chest as he imagines the fates of death, and his teeth begin to chatter. But the brave man's color does not change, and he feels no great fear from the moment he is settled in the men's ambush. But his prayer is to engage in the grim fighting as soon as can be. Even there, no one would scorn your fury in battle for the strength of your hands. If you were hit or stabbed in the labor of fighting, the weapon would not land in your neck behind your back, but would meet you in chest or stomach, as you pressed forward to join the diligence of the champions. But come, we should not stay here bragging on like little boys, or people may resent it strongly. No, you go to my hut and take yourself a heavy spear. So he spoke, and Meriones, like the swift war god himself, quickly took up a bronze spear from the hut and set out after Idomeneus, all his thoughts on battle. Like Ares, curse of men, when he goes out to war, and with him there goes his own son Panic, powerful and fearless. Who can turn even a strong-hearted warrior to flight? These two come out from Thrace to arm for battle with Epiphroy, or with the great-hearted Phleges. And they will not listen to both sides' prayers, but grant the glory to one or the other. Such were Meriones and Idomeneus, leaders of men, as they went out to battle helmeted in gleaming bronze. Meriones spoke first and said to Idomeneus, son of Deucleon, where do you want to enter the fighting? On the right of the army, or in the center, or on the left? That is where I think the long-haired Achaeans will be the weakest in battle. Then Idomeneus, leader of the Cretans, answered him, at the center of the ships there are others to make the defense, the two Iantes and Teucros, who is the best of the Achaeans with the bow, and a good man too in close fighting. They will exercise Hector, Priam's son, to the full, however strong he is and urging for battle. It will be a hard thing for him, with all his fury for the fight, to beat through their strength and their invisible hands, and fire the ships, unless the son of Cronos himself were to hurl a blazing brand on our fast ships. But there is no man that huge Ajax, son of Telamon, will yield to, no man that is mortal and eats the bread of Demeter, and can be broken by bronze or massive stones. He would not give way to Achilles, breaker of men, in a standing fight, but at the run there is no competing with Achilles. So keep on as we are for the left of the army, so we can know soon whether we shall give his triumph to another man, or he to us. So he spoke, and Meriones led on like a swift war god himself, until they came to the part of the army that Idomeneus had told him. When the Trojans saw Idomeneus, looking like a flame in his power, him and his lieutenant in their crafted armor, they called across their massed ranks and made for him all together, and the battle was joined thick by the stern of the ships. And when the gusts swirl strong under the shrilling of the winds, on a day when the dust lies thickest over the paths, and the winds sweep it all into a great standing cloud of dust, so the battle gathered and thickened between them, and their heart's desire was to kill each other with sharp bronze in the welter of fighting. The murderous battles shivered with the long spears they held to cut through flesh. Their eyes were blinded in the flash of bronze from shining helmets and new polished corselets and bright shields as the men came on in their masses. It would be a hard-hearted man indeed who could take pleasure in that sight and not be struck with horror. And the two powerful sons of Cronos, their purposes opposed, caused grim suffering for the human warriors. Zeus willed victory for Hector and the Trojans, to do glory to Achilles and the swift-footed. He did not wish the Achaean army to be utterly destroyed in front of Ilios, but he was bringing glory to Thetis and her strong-hearted son. And Poseidon had come up out of the sea, unseen, to go among the Argives and spur them on. He felt pain to see them broken by the Trojans, and furious anger at Zeus. Both these were indeed of the same descent and parentage, but Zeus was the older born, and had wider knowledge. So Poseidon avoided giving open help, but went covertly up and down the army in man's shape, constantly rousing them to fight. So those gods crossed and tied the ropes of hard conflict and leveling war over both armies, and stretched them taut, not to be slipped or broken, but they broke the strength of many men. Then, grizzled-haired though he was, Idomeneus called the Danaans on and leapt at the Trojans and set them panicking. He killed Orontheus, a visitor in Troy from Cabios, who had come lately, drawn by news of the war, and had asked for the most beautiful of Priam's daughters, Cassandra, without payment of bride price. But instead he had promised a great achievement, to force the Achaeans out of the land of Troy. The old man Priam had assented and promised to give her, and Orontheus was fighting in confidence of these promises. But Idomeneus aimed at him with his shining spear and hit him full as he pranced forward. The bronze corselet he wore could not protect him, and the spear fixed in mid-belly. He fell with a crash, and Idomeneus spoke in triumph over him. Orontheus, I congratulate you above all mortal men, if you are really going to accomplish all that you undertook for Dardanian Priam, when he promised you his daughter. Now we would make you the same promise. We could give you the most beautiful of the son of Atreus' daughter, and fetch her from Argos for you to marry, if you help us to sack the well-founded citadel of Ilios. Come with me, then, to our seafaring ships, so we can agree terms for your marriage. You will not find us hard bargainers for the match." So speaking, the hero Idomeneus took him by the foot and began dragging him through the fury of battle. But Asios came up to protect him, on foot, in front of his horses, which his charioteer held close behind him, so their breath was always on his shoulder. His heart was intent on hitting Idomeneus, but he, quicker with the cast, struck Asios with his spear in the neck under the chin, and drove the bronze right through. He fell as an oak tree falls, or a poplar, or a tall pine, which carpenters cut down in the mountains with fresh whetted axes to make a ship's timber. So he lay there stretched flat in front of his horses and chariot, bellowing and clutching at the blood-soaked dust. His charioteer's wits were shocked out of him, so that he did not have sense to wheel the horses round and escape from the enemy's hands, and brave Antilochus caught him with his spear and pinned him through the middle. The bronze corselet he wore could not protect him, and the spear fixed in mid-belly. He fell gasping from the well-made chariot, and the horses were driven off by Antilochus, son of the great-hearted Nestor, away from the Trojans and back to the well-grieved Achaeans. Then Deiphobos came up very close to Idomeneus, in anger at Asios' death, and cast at him his shining spear. But Idomeneus had looked ahead and avoided the bronze spear, and covered himself behind an even circle of shield which he had always carried, built out of rings of oxhide and gleaming bronze, and braced with 2 crossbars. He crouched his whole body under it, and the spear flew over him. His shield rasped hollow as the spear grazed past it. But it was no wasted shot that Deiphobos let fly with the strength of his arm. He hit Hypsenor, son of Hippasos, shepherd of the people, in the liver under the midriff, and instantly collapsed his strength. Deiphobos shouted loud in terrible triumph. So now Asios does not lie there unavenged, even on his journey down to Hades, the strong keeper of the gate. I think he will be happy at heart, now I have given him a guide. So he spoke, and the Argives were pained at his boasting, and most of all he moved the warrior Antilochus' heart to anger. Yet for all his pain he did not forget his companion, but ran to bestride him and covered him with his shield. Then 2 loyal companions bent under him, Mexitus, son of Echios, and godlike Alastor, and carried him groaning heavily back to the hollow ships. But Idomeneus would not slacken his high fury, but his urge was relentless to envelop some Trojan in black night or crash down himself in defending the Achaeans from destruction. Then he killed the hero Alcathos, dear son of the god-ordained king Aestes. He was son-in-law to Axises, married to the eldest of his daughters, Hippodamie. She was loved with all their hearts by her father and her honored mother in their house, since she surpassed all girls of her age in beauty and handicraft and sense. And so it was that the best man in the broad land of Troy that married her. And now Poseidon brought him down at the hands of Idomeneus. He mazed his shining eyes and ridded his bright body, so that he could not turn back or escape, but stood there motionless like a gravestone or a high leafy tree, while the hero Idomeneus stabbed with his spear in the center of his chest, and broke through the bronze coat that covered it, and had kept destruction from his flesh before now. But then it grated loud as the spear tore it. He fell with a crash, the spear fixed in his heart, and the heart's jerking made the spear quiver right through the butt. And then monstrous Ares took away its force. Idomeneus shouted loud in terrible triumph, "Deiphobos, are we then to reckon it a fair bargain yet, 3 men killed for 1, since that is the way you like to boast? No, friend, you too stand and face me yourself, so you can see and make this offering of Zeus that has come to your land. It was Zeus in the beginning who fathered Minos to be guardian over Crete. Then Minos had a son, the excellent Deucalion, and Deucalion fathered me to be king over many people in broad Crete. And now my ships have carried me here as a curse to you and your father and the other Trojans." So he spoke, and Deiphobos was torn in thought, whether to draw back and make company with some other great-hearted Trojan, or to attempt him alone as he was. And this seemed the best plan to his thinking, to go in search of Aeneas. He found him at the rear of the battle, standing idle. He kept up a constant anger against godlike Priam, because he would show him no honor, for all that he was a leading man among them. Deiphobos came close and spoke winged words to him. Aeneas, counselor of the Trojans, you must fight now for your brother-in-law. The need is great, if grief for him touches you at all. Come with me, let us fight for Acheloos. He is your sister's husband, and long ago raised you in the house when you were small, and Idomeneus, the famous spearman, has killed him. So he spoke, and moved Aeneas' heart in his breast to anger, and he went after Idomeneus, all his thoughts on battle. But no panic seized Idomeneus, as if he were a mere boy. He stood his ground, like a boar in the mountains, sure of his power, who faces a great rabble of men coming against him in a solitary place, and bristles the ridge of his back. His eyes flash with fire, and he whets his tusks, ready to beat off dogs and men. So Idomeneus, the famous spearman, stood his ground, and would not retreat, as Aeneas came running against him. But he shouted to his companions, looking to Ascalaphus and Apharos and Diprios and Meriones and Antilochus, rousers of the battle cry. He called to them in winged words, urging them to his aid. Over here, friends, and help me. I am alone and terribly afraid of the attack of swift-footed Aeneas, who is coming at me now. And he has all the strength to kill in battle, and he is at the flower of youth, too, which is the greatest power in man. If we, too, were of the same age, with this spirit in us, then there would soon be a great victory won, his or mine. So he spoke, and they all came with one purpose in their hearts and close round him, sloping their shields against their shoulders. And Aeneas, on the other side, called to his companions, looking to Deiphobos and Paris and godlike Agenor, fellow leaders of the Trojans. And then the common troops followed after him, as when sheep follow after the ram to the drinking place from their pasture, and the shepherd is gladdened at heart. So Aeneas' heart was glad in his breast when he saw the company of his troops following him. So they joined close battle over Alcathous with long spears. The bronze of their chests rang fearfully as they cast at each other in the mass of fighting. Two men were fierce for war beyond all others, Aeneas and Idomeneus, men like Ares, urgent to tear each other's flesh with their pitiless bronze. Aeneas cast first at Idomeneus, but he had looked ahead and avoided the bronze spear, and Aeneas' weapon went quivering into the ground, sped, wasted from his massive hand. Then Idomeneus hit Oenomaus in mid-belly, and broke through the corselet's front piece, and the bronze let his bowels gush out. He crashed into the dust, and his hand clawed the earth. Idomeneus pulled his long-shadowed spear out of the body, but could not go on to take the fine armor from his shoulders, as the spears were overwhelming him. His legs no longer had the speed for a quick dash, either to change in after his own spear cast or avoid another's. So his way to keep off the pitiless hour of death was to fight a standing battle, as his legs could no longer carry him lightly and escape from the fighting. As he slowly backed away, Deiphobos cast at him with a shining spear. He had a settled hatred for him now. But once more he missed, and hit Ascalaphus with his spear, the son of Ares and Ilios. The heavy spear kept on through his shoulder, and he crashed in the dust, and his hand clawed the earth. But monstrous Ares, the loud shouter, did not yet know of his son's fall in the fury of battle. He was sitting under the golden clouds on the heights of Olympus, confined there by Zeus's command, and there were the other immortal gods also, debarred from the fighting. But the men joined close battle over Ascalaphus. Deiphobos tore the shining helmet from Ascalaphus, but Meriones leapt at him like the swift war god himself and struck him in the arm with his spear, and the masking helmet fell from his hand, clanging to the ground. Meriones leapt in again like a vulture, and pulled a heavy spear from the upper arm, then moved back into the mass of his companions. Polites, full brother of Deiphobos, put his arm round his waist and led him away from the grim clash of war as far as his quick horses, which were standing with their driver and the decorated chariot behind the battle and the fighting. They carried him to the city, groaning heavily in his pain as the blood ran from his fresh wound in his arm. Meanwhile the others fought on, and the clamor rose ceaseless. Then Aeneas leapt at Apharis, son of Calator, and struck him in the throat with his sharp spear when he turned to face him. His head sank to one side, and his shield and helmet folded in on him, and death, the breaker of spirits, poured round him. Antilochus watched for Thuon to turn, and then sprang forward and stabbed him, cutting right through the vein that runs all the way down the back to reach the neck. He cut right through this, and Theon collapsed on his back in the dust, holding out both arms to his dear companions. Antilochus leapt in and began to take the armor from his shoulder, looking sharply about him. And the Trojans gathered to surround him and thrust at his broad glittering shield, but they could not get past it, even to graze Antilochus' soft flesh with the pitiless bronze, because Poseidon the Earthshaker was protecting Nestor's son, even in that welter of weapons. He was never clear of enemies, but turned and twisted among them, and his spear was not still in his hand, but quivered all the time in the poise of his grip. And the aim of his mind was to cast at some enemy or charge in hand to hand. But Adamas, Asios' son, noticed him looking for his target in the mass of men, and ran in close and stabbed at the center of his shield with his sharp bronze. But dark-haired Poseidon crippled his spear and denied it a life. Half of it fixed there in Antilochus' shield like a charred stake, the other half lay on the ground. Adamas shrank back into the mass of his companions to avoid destruction, but Meriones caught him as he went back and struck him with his spear between the genitals and navel, the place where death in war comes most painfully to suffering mortals. There the spear fixed fast in him. He collapsed round it and writhed, struggling as an ox does when herdsmen have forced ropes around him in the mountains and drag him resistant with him. So he struggled under the blow for a short while, for no great time, until the hero Meriones came close and pulled the spear out of his flesh, and darkness covered over his eyes. Helenos closed in on Diprios and struck him with his sword on the temple, a great Thracian sword, which smashed the helmet from his head. The helmet fell dislodged to the ground, and some Achaean picked it up where it rolled among the feet of the fighters, and black night covered over the man's eyes. At this, furious grief came over the son of Arteus, Menelaus, the master of war cry. He made for the hero Lord Helenos, shaking his sharp spear in menace, and Helenos drew back against the grip of his bow. The two were ready to let fly at the same moment, one with a sharp spear, the other with an arrow from the string. Then the son of Priam hit Menelaus in the chest with an arrow, on the front piece of his corslet, but the bitter arrow flew glancing off it, as when on a great threshing floor, the black-skinned beans or chickpeas fly from the broad shovel, sent spinning by the whistle of the wind and the winnowers swing. So the bitter arrow glanced full of glorious Menelaus' corslet and flew on far. And the son of Atreus, Menelaus, master of the war cry, hit Helenos in the hand where he held the polished bow, and the bronze spear was driven right through the hand into the bow. Helenos shrank back into the mass of his companions to avoid destruction, his hand dangling by his side, and the ash spear trailed after him. Then great-hearted Agenor pulled the spear from his hand and bound the hand up in a length of twisted sheep's wool, the loop of a sling which his lieutenant held out for the shepherd of the people. Now Pisiandros came straight for glorious Menelaus, but cruel fate was leading him on towards the end of death, to be brought down by you, Menelaus, in grim combat. When they had advanced to close range, the son of Atreus missed with his cast, and his spear swerved to the side. Pisiandros pierced glorious Menelaus' shield, but could not drive the bronze right through. The broad shield held it, and the spear snapped at the socket. But he felt joy in his heart and hope of victory. The son of Atreus drew his silver-studded sword and leapt at Pisiandros, while he took from under his shield a fine axe, with its blade of strong bronze set on a haft of olive wood, long and smooth polished. Their blows struck together. Pisiandros hit the ridge of the horse-plumed helmet at the top just below the crest, and as he came on, Menelaus struck him on the forehead above the base of the nose. The bones cracked, and his eyes dropped bloody in the dust at his feet. He doubled and fell, and Menelaus, bracing his foot against his chest, pulled off his armor and spoke in triumph over him. That, Trojans, is how you will leave the ships of the fast-horsed Danaans, you violent men, gluttons for the hideous noise of war. No shortage already of your shame and outrage, that outrage done to me, you vile dogs, with no fear in your hearts of the punishing anger of Zeus the Thunderer, God of host and guest, who in time will destroy your high city. You took the wife of my marriage and much property besides, and sailed away with her heedless when you were guests in her house. And now your aim is to throw deadly fire on our seagoing ships and to kill the fighting men of the Achaeans. But you will be stopped, I think, for all your lust for war. Father Zeus, they say your wisdom is beyond all others, men and gods, and yet you are the source of all of this. The way you favor these men of violence, these Trojans whose fighting fury have no limit, who cannot sate themselves with the clash of leveling war. Men reach their fill of all things, even of sleep and love and sweet music and the delightful dance, things in which a man would rather slack his pleasure than in war, but the Trojans cannot have their fill of battle. So speaking, the excellent Menelaus handed the blood-stained armor he had stripped from the body to his companions, and he himself went out again to join the front fighters. Then the son of Palamenes leapt at him, Harpalion, who had come with his dear father to fight at Troy, but did not return again to his native land. He now came close and stabbed with his spear in the center of the son of Atreus' shield, but could not drive the bronze right through, and shrank back into the mass of his companions to avoid destruction, looking sharply all around him, so that no one should find his flesh with their bronze. But Meriones sent a bronze-tipped arrow at him as he retreated, and struck him in the right buttocks. The arrow passed through under the bone and into his bladder. He sank down where he was, in the arms of his dear companions, the life breathing from him, and lay there curled on the earth like a worm, and the dark blood ran from him, soaking the ground. The great-hearted Paphlagonians looked to the body, and lifted him into a chariot, and carried him in sorrow to sacred Ilios, and with them went his father with his tears falling. But there was to be no recompense for the death of his son. Now Paris' heart was greatly angered at the killing of Harpalion, as he was his guest friend among the many men of Paphlagonia. And in anger for him he let fly a bronze-tipped arrow. There was a man called Euchenor, son of the seer Polydios, a rich man and a noble, whose home was in Corinth. He had boarded his ship in full knowledge that this was his doom and destruction. Many times the old man, the noble Polydius, had told him that he would die of a painful sickness in his house, or join the Achaeans' fleet and be brought down by the Trojans. So he came to avoid both the heavy fine the Achaeans would take from him and the pain he would suffer at the heart of a hateful sickness. Paris hit him under the jaw and ear. The life sped from his body, and the hateful darkness took him. So they fought on like burning fire, but Hector, beloved of Zeus, had not heard of this, and did not know that to the left of the ships his people were being cut down by the Argives, and there might soon have been victory for the Achaeans. Such was the spurring given the Argives by Poseidon, the encircler and shaker of the earth, and he was adding his own strength to their defense. But Hector kept driving on where he had first stormed through the gates and the wall and broken the close-packed ranks of Danaan shield-bearers, where the ships of Ajax and Prostelios were formed up in the shore of the gray sea. The wall protecting these had been built very low, and here the Trojans, foot soldiers and chariots, were at their most ferocious in attack. Here the Boeotians and long-coated Ionians, the Locrians, the Pythians, and glittering Epeans could hardly hold godlike Hector as he rushed for the ships like a flame, and they were unable to beat him back. Here, too, were the pick of the Athenians. Leader among them was Menethius, son of Petios, and with him Phidias, and Stichios, and brave Bias. The Epeans were led by Megas, son of Philius, and Amphion, and Drachios, and at the head of the Pythians were Medon, and the staunch fighter Podarchus. Medon was a bastard son of the godlike Oileus, and brother of Ajax, but he lived in Philolake, away from his native land, and he had killed a man, the brother of his stepmother Erypos, wife of Oileus, and Podarchus was the son of Iphiclos, the son of Philocos. These, then, were under arms at the head of the great-hearted Philians, and fought together with the Boeotians in defense of their ships. But Ajax, quick son of Oileus, would not now take his place anywhere away from the side of Telamon Ajax, not even a little way, but as a pair of wine-red oxen strain at the joined plow over fallow land, matched in their eagerness for work, and the sweat springs copious at the base of their horns. Only the breath of the polished yoke separates them as they labor down the furrow until the plow cuts into the headland of the field. So these two took their stand close to each other, side by side. Now the son of Telamon was attended by his people, many brave companions to take his shield from him whenever the sweat and exertion tired his body. But the great-hearted son of Oileus was now not joined by his Locrians. Their hearts did not have the will for close fighting, as they had no horse-plumed helmets made of bronze, and no rounded shields or ash spears, but they had come to Ilios with their confidence in bows and slings of twisted sheep's wool, and their dense volleys with these weapons could break the Trojan battalions. So now the others fought in the front in their crafted armor against the Trojans and bronze-armored Hector, and the Locrians kept shooting from safety behind, and the Trojans began to lose their spirit for battle as the arrows threw them into disarray. Then the Trojans would have made a sorry retreat away from the ships and huts to windy Ilios if Polydamas had not come up to brave Hector and said, "Hector, you are a difficult man when advice should be taken. Because God has granted you excellence in battle, this makes you want to outdo others in the mind's work too. But you cannot choose of your own will to have all gifts together. God gives one man skill in battle, and to another he gives dancing, and to a third the playing of the lyre and song, and in another man's breast wide-seeking Zeus puts wisdom, which brings benefit to many men, and is the saving of many too, as he knows best of all. Now I shall tell you what seems best to me. All around you there is blazing a ring of battle, but the other great-hearted Trojans, now that they have crossed the wall, are either standing by armed but idle, or scattered among the ships in small groups fighting larger numbers. No, you should pull back and summon all the leading men to join you here. Then we can properly consider our plan overall, whether we should fall on their many benched ships, in the hope that God may be willing to grant us victory, or whether we should rather draw back from the ships without loss. For my part, I fear that the Achaeans may pay us back their debt of yesterday, as there is waiting by their ships a man who is greedy for war, and I do not think he will keep right out of the fighting any longer." So Polydamas spoke, and his saving advice pleased Hector. He immediately jumped down to the ground from his chariot with all his armor, and spoke winged words to him. "Polydamas, you hold all leading men here, while I go over there and see to the fighting. I shall be quickly back when I have given them full orders." So speaking, Hector set off like a snow-capped mountain, and shouted as he went, speeding fast through the ranks of the Trojans and their allies. And they all streamed to join the son of Panthous, the kindly Polydamas. When they heard And they all streamed to join the son of Panathus, the kindly Polydamas, when they heard Hector's call. But Hector kept ranging among the front fighters, looking as if he could find Deiphobos and the mighty Lord Helenos, and Eos' son Adamas, and Asos, son of Hyrtacos. And he found that none of them now had completely escaped death or injury, but 2 were lying in the sterns of the Achaean ships, their lives lost at the hands of the Argives. And the others were inside the city wall, wounded by shot or stab. But he did soon find godlike Alexandros, husband of lovely-haired Helen, out on the left of the ruinous fighting, urging on his men and spurring them to battle. Hector came close and spoke to him with insulting words. "Paris, you pest, good for nothing but looks, you woman-crazed seducer, where are Deiphobos and the mighty Lord Helenos, and Asios' son, Adamas, and Asios' son, Hyrtacos? What have you done with them? And where is Othrenios? Now the whole of high Ilios is utterly ruined. Now your own sheer destruction is assured." Then godlike Alexandros answered him, "Hector, since you are minded to lay blame where no blame lies, I tell you there may be other times when I have held back from fighting, but not now. I, too, was not born a complete coward. From the moment you roused your men to battle by the ships, we have been here engaging the Danaans without pause. The companions you ask after are killed. Only Deiphobos and the mighty Lord Helenos have gone back, both wounded by long spears in the arm. But the son of Cronos kept death from them. Now you lead on, wherever your heart and spirit urge you, and we shall follow in all eagerness. And I do not think there will be any lack of courage, as far as the strength is in us. A man cannot fight beyond his strength, however keen." So speaking, the hero won his brother's heart, and they set off to where the clash of battle was fiercest, around Cebriones, and the excellent Polydamas, Phalces, and Orthaeus, and the godlike Polyphetus, Palmus, and Ascanos, and Morus, 2 sons of Hippotocion, who had come as relief from fertile Ascani at dawn the day before, and now Zeus had roused them to battle. The Trojans came on like a cruel wind's blast, which swoops to earth driven by the thunder of Father Zeus, and with a tremendous roar cuts into the salt sea water. And the waves boil countless over the sounding sea, curling and cresting white, rank after rank. So the Trojans came on behind their leaders in close order, rank following rank, and glittering in bronze. At their head, like Ares, the curse of men, went Hector, Priam's son. Before him he held the even circle of his shield, close compacted of hides, with bronze beaten thick over it, and his helmet shook bright around the temples. He would stride forward and try the enemy ranks at every point along their line, hoping they would give way before his advance under cover of his shield. But he could not break the resolve in the hearts of the Achaeans. Ajax came out first with huge strides and challenged him. "Poor man, come closer. Why these empty attempts to frighten the Argives? We Achaeans are no novices in battle, but it was the vile lash of Zeus that beat us down. I suppose your heart must be hoping to destroy our ships, but we have hands too, ready at a moment to defend them. Much sooner than that our hands will have taken and sacked your well-founded city. And I tell you that the time is close for you yourself, when you will run from us and pray to Father Zeus and the other immortals to make your lovely maned horses faster than hawks as they raise the dust over the plain to carry you back to your city." As he spoke these words, a bird flew by him on the right, an eagle soaring high, and the Achaeans' army shouted its joy at the cheer of the omen. And glorious Hector answered, "Ajax, great blustering oaf, what rant that is! If only for all my days I could be the son of Zeus who holds the aegis. I have Queen Hera for my mother, and be honored with the honor given to Athena and Apollo, as surely as this day now brings doom to the Argives, to every one of them. And you will die with the others, if you dare to stand against my long spear, which will tear your lily-soft skin, and you will glut the dogs and birds of Troy with your fat and your flesh, lying fallen by the ships of the Achaeans." So speaking, Hector led on, and his men followed with a tremendous clamor, and the whole army behind him shouted with them. And the Argives raised a shout on their side, and would not lose their courage for the fight, but soon stood firm. And the advance of the Trojan leaders, and the clamor from both sides reached up to the sky and Zeus' brightness.